Dawn does not brighten Komodo Island so much as it removes excuses. The light comes thin and patient, sliding over limestone hills, testing the edges of lontar palms, waking little lizards that flee like thoughts you didn't mean to have. And when the heat rises, as it always does, everything inside this dry forest begins to slow down. Everything except the one thing that lives by waiting. He lies still as a fallen log. Dust rests on his back the way years rest on a story. A Komodo dragon, 3 meters long, armored in tiny bones under the skin, eyes like sunburned coins. His tongue flickers, forked, pale, tasting the morning as if it were a trail he could walk without moving. He has done nothing loud for days. He has done everything necessary. Across the savanna edge, a water buffalo stands in shade, as if shade were a promise. Scars map its flanks, mud painted into old decisions. It shifts weight, swats flies with a tail that has argued with heat since heat learned to talk. The buffalo lowers its head, pulls at tough grass, chews a thought into smaller pieces. Around its nose, the day smells like salt and dust, and something that should not be ignored. The dragon knows that smell. It is the edge of a plan. 10 days ago, he made a choice and turned it into patience. It began at a wallow where heat had squeezed water into a shallow mirror. Buffalo rolled there, slow as stones, turning their hides into brown rivers to cool the fever out of noon. The dragon approached on legs that didn't look like stealth until they were. He did not run. Running is for animals that can waste motion and still live. He walked with the gravity of confidence, a sentence that did not need adjectives. He slid beside the mud like a rumor, pretending to be quiet. The buffalo lifted its head, blinked, decided the world was ordinary, and went back to being heavy. The dragon waited until ordinary forgot him. Then he turned ordinary into consequence. A sudden rush, a lunge that looked like a shrug until the last half-meter. Jaws opened, hinged for absurdity, lined with backward-pointing teeth meant not for slicing perfection, but for grabbing indifference and dragging it toward regret. He bit low, inside the ankle, where tendons sing the song of balance. The buffalo bellowed a vowel that never learned to end. Mud detonated. The dragon let go, slid backward, settled, watched. This is the work most predators hate, stepping away from the taste of victory and choosing the taste of certainty. The dragon does not hurry. He trusts time to do the heavy lifting. Inside his mouth, venom seeped into the wound, anticoagulants and hypotensive agents, a dark chemistry that tells the body it is time to dim the room. Inside the buffalo, bacteria gleaned from carrion and consequence began to write their long letter to the blood. The dragon blinked. The buffalo stumbled. The day became what it always becomes, long. For a creature that can sprint short bursts and bully goats into polite surrender, patience is not a virtue. It is a weapon. He uses it like a craftsman uses a favored hammer, often, lightly, perfectly. For 10 days he has shadowed the buffalo, through heat that made stones hallucinate rain. He tailed the herd at a respectful, impolite distance, his tongue tasting from meters away what most animals discover only by standing in trouble. He followed the spoor of weakness, droppings that tell different stories, footprints that drag fractions of a second too long, the sighs a heavy body makes when the afternoon doesn't promise forgiveness. He waited near paths the buffalo had always preferred, because habits are bridges you don't see, until someone has crossed them into you. On the second day, the buffalo limped. On the third, it visited the wallow less and the shade more. On the fourth, it drank without believing drinking was enough. On the fifth, its herd began to treat it like weather, noticed, endured, left to the sky. On the sixth, it chose a valley where breeze forgets to come. On the seventh, the wound smelled like a map the dragon could read with his eyes closed. On the eighth, oxpeckers found their parliament along the buffalo's ribs. On the ninth, the buffalo traveled only from shade to shade, shrinking the world to islands made out of regret. Now, on the 10th, the dragon rests a body length away from bushes that have learned not to comment on anything. Heat irons the landscape flat. Cicadas play a note that seems to grow teeth. The dragon moves once to slide a scale against a rock, sharpening by accident, remembering on purpose. His breath is steady. His heart is a slow drum asking the same patient question it asked yesterday. Not yet. His tongue flicks. 1, 2, and the answer dries into certainty. He rises. It is not dramatic. He is the opposite of surprise. He walks in a line, angled for the buffalo's blind side, toes splayed, claws scratching small truths out of dust. He pauses when a wind plays with the grass, because moving when everything else moves is an old spell that still works. He resumes when the wind forgets its lines. When he is close enough to name the flies individually, he stops. The buffalo lifts its head. Its eyes are moons that didn't arrive on time. It sees the dragon. It sees the shape of mistakes and the distance between now and last week. This is the moment prey sometimes sprint out of denial into legend. It does not sprint. Legend is heavy and far. It lowers its head not to charge, but to breathe with less argument. The dragon takes 3 final steps, swinging his head low, like a pendulum built for endings. He opens his mouth and bites again, just forward of the first wound. Teeth pull at flesh the way hooks pull on a story. He saws backward with his neck, a brutal, practiced motion. A strip of meat comes away, like the last sentence of a long letter torn off by the wind. Blood darkens the dirt to something almost polished. The buffalo lurches, staggers, drops to a knee, stands, drops again. Others arrive. From the shoulder of a hill, a second dragon ambles down, smaller, hungrier, impolite in the way youth is when it forgets the price of offense. From the scrub toward the dry creek, a third slides into view, tongue testing the mathematics of distance and courage. They do not challenge the big one yet. They lounge at angles that could be called polite if you were generous enough to redefine the word. The old dragon hisses, a sound like sand deciding to be a song. It is not a warning, it is a policy. He returns to the soft place he has made and bites again, tearing and tugging, pulling muscles into reasons. The buffalo drops fully now, folding front first, back legs arguing, then agreeing. The earth takes the weight without comment. Breath becomes a shorter debt. Flies gather into dark punctuation along the edges of everything. The dragon steps onto the body, claws anchoring, jaws working in the blunt, efficient rhythm of a machine, built in the style of hunger. He eats like an editor, removing what delays meaning. The tongue, quick as an eel, passes over bone as if blessing it for later. Push, pull, lock, tear, swallow. Push, pull, lock, tear, swallow. Strings of muscle disappear as if he were untying the afternoon. His belly swells by increments, a ledger, row by row, settling its numbers into satisfaction. The smaller dragons test the air between caution and audacity. They close a meter. A hiss pushes them back a meter and the idea of another one. They circle, learning with their feet what they already know with their tongues, that hierarchy is a geography, and today's map was drawn by the one that did the waiting. Across the flats, clouds build on volcanic shoulders, tall as unmade decisions. The wind shifts and forgets to be hot for 3 breaths. Goats clink their bells against the outline of the hills. A sea eagle hangs above, a letter without an address, reading the scene and deciding it cannot sign its name at the bottom. The old dragon eats until eating stops being a verb and becomes a condition. He pulls his head free with a sound that is not a sound, only the absence of one. He steps off the body with the dignity of a loaded ship. He walks a few paces and collapses in the shade, an ancient rug breathing in the style of the earth. His tongue flicks once as if to say, "Finished with the beginning." Now, scavengers ask their questions. A dozen long-tailed macaques appear on a rock like a jury that knows it will be ignored. A monitor lizard, the size of impatience, wanders in, then wanders out, because the mood is not for negotiation. The second and third dragons close, and the air tightens like a drum. The big one lifts his head, hisses again, and the second flattens to the ground, belly pressed, neck stretched low, in deference that could turn into treachery and one inflation of pride. The third waits until deference choreographs an opening. They begin to feed in a triangle, each angle defined by memory of scars. This is not a frenzy. It is an order that looks like chaos to animals that eat schedules. Teeth trade time. Hisses mark margins. Tail whips write quick punctuation in dust. Every mouthful is bought with a glance. Heat quivers. The sky becomes a kiln. The corpse becomes less like a buffalo and more like a task. The camera of the day pulls back, not with glass and gears, but with shadows that lengthen the ground, until the ground looks like stories stacked on top of each other. Komodo Island hums, crickets begin their shift. A gecko calls its single unanswerable syllable from the rafters of a ruined hut beyond the ridge. In the late afternoon, the big dragon is a monument to being fed. He drags himself to a patch of grit and lies belly down where warmth will continue the work even as effort stops. His eyes lit in the lazy way of things that cannot be hurried, and therefore cannot be ruled by anything in a hurry. Inside, acids make small essential arguments with muscle and fat. Outside, skin tightens and gleams, tension describing the new shape of hunger. Satisfied. Night folds the day carefully and tucks it into the space between volcano and sea. Stars arrive like a rumor of diamonds, unspendable and bright. The other dragons clean the bones with patience learned from fathers they ate. Jackals don't live here. Vultures come rarely. Feral dogs fear dragons the way stories fear silence. By moonrise, white shines where animal used to be. The old dragon dreams without dreaming. Sleep is not a place he visits. It's a climate inside him. a weather system he can summon when he has chosen well. His heart slows, his mind floats. His body becomes a temple where time is the only priest. Morning finds him heavy with purpose accomplished. He rises and moves like cargo. Every step pushes a line of prints into dust shaped like the future trying to remember the past. He heads toward a slope where wind trades gossip with shade, where he can sprawl like a thrown rope and let the world walk around him. On the way, he passes a smaller dragon that peels off the carcass and freezes, deciding between courtesy and ambition. The old one doesn't bother to decide for him. He has discovered the only law that matters here. Patience owns the deed. He climbs the slope with the arrogance of gravity turned obedient. At the crest, he stops and stares at nothing, which is to say, everything. Sea that pretends to be steel, hills that pretend to be permanent, sky that pretends to be empty. His tongue writes tiny pale lines in the air. If taste were a map, he would already be home. There will be no hunting for days. Digestion is a pilgrimage. He will bury himself half in dust and half in shade, regulating, moving the sun along the length of his ribs like a lover's hand. He will not waste a twitch. A fly will land and leave, unremarked. A beetle will blunder into the shadow of a legend and blunder out again, unchanged. Time will work. At noon, heat stacks on heat until the earth hums. The dragon lifts his head to shift an inch. Muscles ripple like a story told by someone who has told it before and enjoys the telling. Scars, old coins under the skin, glisten, then disappear, then glisten again. His eyes close. His throat moves once, a swallow that sounds like the word mine, said by stone. Far below, the bones became lesson rather than meal. A few crows pick the uninteresting leftovers. A skink suns itself on a rib, as if rib were the name of a small island. A tourist boat passes far offshore, its wake a line underlining the sea's sentence. No one on board imagines how close the island is to a patience powerful enough to plan a week. An hour passes, then another, then a sleepy army of hours that carry afternoon into the soft idea of evening. Wind returns. Clouds that were merely thinking about being clouds become clouds. The old dragon lifts his head and watches the horizon tilt into gold. He did not win today by speed. He did not win by strength alone. He won by being the animal with the courage to do nothing when everything else panicked. In a world built to reward haste and noise, he practiced the quieter craft, deciding early and then not changing his mind. On the far edge of the plain, a goat calls a goat's opinion into air that does not intend to keep it. Two juveniles chase a lizard that can outthink them with one curve of a shadow. A sea breeze finds the dragon and paints salt along his tongue. He tastes the world, and finding it satisfactory, lowers his head again. Night returns. The moon climbs a stair it did not build. Geckos speak their names. A palm frond clacks like a sage refusing to hurry a sentence. The island, tired in all the right ways, goes to work on tomorrow. Days pass. The dragon shrinks from enormous to merely huge. The belly falls back into its old address. Strength returns to the shoulders like guests, arriving just after noon. His tongue starts to ask questions farther downwind. His feet remember errands. On the 5th day after feeding, he visits the dry creek, not to drink, but to read the delicate graffiti water wrote and left behind. Hoof marks softened at the edges, a broken twig pointing at nothing. A print of another dragon overlapped with his own from a month before, the kind of palimpsest only the illiterate can write, and only the patient can read. He nods, which is to say he lowers and raises his head in a movement so slow only the day sees it. He continues. On the 7th day he watches feral horses pass in single file, bodies stiff with drought etiquette. He does not chase. He takes one step aside so that the dust of their manners doesn't touch him. He licks the air and catalogues endurance as if it were a scent. On the 9th day he sunbathes in a rectangle of light that remembers being morning, even at noon. A hornbill clatters past, outraged by a tree, outraged by air. The dragon blinks, as if correcting the hornbill's grammar without speaking. On the 10th day since the kill, he is light again. Not small, nothing about him is ever small, but ready. His body has turned meat into muscle, distance into possibility, waiting into a sharper kind of hunger. He stands, shakes dust off his back in a wave that travels from neck to tail, checks the world with a tongue flick that asks exactly the right question. Down the slope near a thorny fig that wails the sky with shade, a young boar digs at the earth as if treasure could be found by faith alone. The wind is wrong for the boar, right for the dragon. He descends without announcing, a shadow learning to be heavy, a rock remembering legs. He stops where stopping looks like part of the hill. The boar snorts, complains to the ground, keeps digging. The dragon's tongue flicks twice. The boar finds a root and believes in it completely. The dragon closes the last 4 meters in 3 steps that do not invite applause. He hits like punctuation. The boar stumbles sideways into the shock of being prey. Teeth find flank. The dragon pulls, twists, releases, retreats. 1 bite is a proposition. 2 is proof. The boar bolts, bleeding conviction. The dragon watches him go with the kindness of a judge who knows the verdict will arrive in its own time. He will follow for a day or 3. He will taste the air and measure the way it thickens with the news of blood. He will move when moving is the same as winning. He will stop when the world tells him to, and start when it becomes polite not to. He will do what a dragon does best: select, begin, and then refuse to spoil the beginning by rushing the end. Back on the ridge where the sea keeps its appointment with the horizon, the old dragon pauses in a composition of body and place that painters would ruin by painting. He looks like something that was here before the island learned its name. He looks like the piece of the earth that remembers how to be hard. If you were to write the day, you might say nothing happened, and you would be wrong. If you were to measure the day, you might count steps and miss the distance. If you were to summarize the day, you might file it under waiting, and you would be half right. Because waiting here is not empty. It is architecture. It is a scaffolding the dragon builds inside time, and then climbs without moving. It is how heat becomes hunger, becomes plan, becomes debt, becomes payment. It is how a lizard becomes a legend. Not by roaring, not by chasing, not by showing off teeth, but by knowing precisely when to spend the quiet he hoards in his bones. The island exhales. A breeze runs a finger through dry grass and finds it bristly. The sea says one word over and over: yes, until it means everything else. The dragon, whose ribs are again a tidy secret, slides into the shade meant for him and lowers his head as if thanking the day for its cooperation. Tomorrow, he will taste wind and choose a valley. He will put his feet into dust soft enough to remember him. He will walk a line only he can see, written in odor the way a map is written in ink. He will pass stones that could be him, and bushes that could be goats, and goats that could be stones. He will be mistaken for the background until the background decides to end. 10 days ago, he chose a buffalo and made time his accomplice. Today, he begins another sentence with fangs and ends it with sunlight on his back. Somewhere, boiled air shimmers, and in the shimmer, a goat turns into an idea the dragon chooses not to have. Somewhere, a ranger boat hums along the coast, a human line across a reptile paragraph. Somewhere, inside the heavy heart of the island, another dragon waits under a pile of leaves, because patience here is not a tactic. It is a climate you live inside, or you leave. The sun spills down the slope in amber coins the earth never spends. The dragon's tongue writes pale questions above the grass. The questions are always the same, and always enough. Where is weakness? Where is the wind? When is the moment? When it comes, it will come without trumpets. It will arrive as calmly as a shadow lengthening, as quietly as a scale settling against dust. It will be something you almost miss while noticing everything else. Then the world will tilt, a body will fall, and ancient patience will reach out one more time and finish exactly what it started. If you stand here long enough, you will learn his language, the meaning of stillness, the grammar of timing, the syntax of heat. You will begin to see hunting as a paragraph with most of the words left out, and you will understand why the island gives its crown to the animal that can hold a decision in its mouth longer than anyone else can hold their breath. The Komodo dragon waited 10 days to kill. He will wait 10 more if waiting is what the day requires, because on this island, the loudest power is the one you don't hear moving, and the sharpest weapon is the one you mistake for a rock, until it becomes the last thing that ever touches you. And when the camera climbs into evening and the sea takes the sky's reflection back, let the final line be this: simple, true, unhurried enough to last beyond the credits. Some hunters run, this one waits, and the island keeps score in patience.